It's been about 6 years ago that I first laid my hands on the Raspberry Pi. So what you see here is my very first Raspberry Pi that I owned back in the day. And 6 years after, the hardware has gone several revisions. And today in this video, we will be doing a detailed look and setup of the Raspberry Pi 3. So I'm your host, Emily. Let's get started. So what do we need to set up the Raspberry Pi? First of all, we would need the Raspberry Pi itself. And what I have here is the Raspberry Pi 3 Model B version. The next thing that we would need to set up is the SD card itself. So here in this case, we would need a micro SD card. So you could use anywhere from 8 gigabytes and above. And then, of course, to provide the power supply to the board, you would need the micro USB adapter. And in this case, you can use any of your mobile chargers with. Yeah, so what else do we need? We also need to have a monitor with the HDMI monitor or a TV screen with HDMI support so that we can plug in for the display. And the last thing is, when you want to use this device as a headless device, you would need an additional keyboard and a mouse. So in this case, I'm going to use a wireless keyboard and mouse. So I just need one adapter, one plug which plugs in to my Raspberry Pi. This will be mostly a wireless setup except for the power supply and the HDMI. And in case of a headless version, you could even skip the HDMI cable and you have a completely standalone device connected somewhere and having no hardware cables running to except for the power supply. So that's it for this part. Now let's see how we can prepare the image. So when you go to the download section of the raspberrypi.org website, you are provided with a list of operating systems that are compatible with Raspberry Pis. But in our case, we would focus on the Raspbian, since we need a desktop environment, or since we want to use the Raspberry Pi as a PC. And in this video, we will focus on the Raspbian, but I will be making another video to show what exactly the noobs option in the download section means. So going in with the Raspbian, you are provided with 3 options. The first option is the complete installation of the Raspbian with desktop and also a few recommended softwares. And the other version is the complete Raspbian with a desktop environment minus the recommended software. And the last version is the Raspbian with just a console and no desktop environment integrated. So in this case, I will be showing you the Raspbian stretch with desktop. This zip file that you have to save in the location. In my case, I've already saved it. The second thing you need is the software, which will help you write this image onto the SD card. And for that, you have to go to this installation guide. And in the installation guide, you will find a program called Etcher. And Etcher is a program that is written such that it works similarly on Mac, Linux, and Windows. So you don't have to bother about following different instructions on different PCs. So you can use the same program to work with all different versions. But when you download, you have to make sure that you download the Etcher, which corresponds to the operating system that you are running on. And in my case, I've already downloaded this Etcher program, so which will be another zip file, so to say. And once you have these 2 zip files, the image and the Etcher program, you can work with your hardware. So we go to the download section, and in the download section we have these 2 programs, the zip file, the Raspbian stretch and the Berliner Etcher blah blah blah. So on extracting the Etcher program, you are provided with one file So in case of a Linux machine, this is a .app image file, but in case of a Windows machine, I think it is a .exe file. And running this program takes you to running this program gives you this window. This is an Azure program, and it's just basically 3-step procedure. So first thing, you choose the image that you want to write into. In our case, this is the Raspbian stretch zip file. And then you have to choose the SD card. In my case, I have just one SD card. In case if you have multiple SD cards, then you have to choose one amongst the multiple cards that you have. And then the last step is to flash. And once you start the flash procedure, you're asked for your admin password. Since this involves disk operation, Linux always asks you for this permission. Once you grant the permission, the flashing itself will start, and this will take a couple of minutes. So if you notice, the Azure has finished flashing the image onto the SD card, and you can see the status here. And before we unplug the SD card, I would like to quickly give you an overview of all the files that are present in this SD card. So if you see, the SD card is now partitioned into 2 different partitions. One is the boot partition, and the other one is a root file system. And root file system is where all the files that corresponds to the Raspbian image itself is copied. And the boot folder contains the kernel image and also some device tree blobs. So these device tree blobs are files that contain some information about the hardware, the different peripherals that the SoC contain, and where the kernel can, and which address the kernel can find these peripherals. So such information is packed into these device tree files, and the kernel, when it boots, reads these files that correspond to the hardware, and then loads the kernel modules accordingly. And also another file that might come in handy is the config.txt file, which contains some additional hardware setups and hardware configurations. So now let's take the SD card, plug it into the hardware, and see how it works. Let's prepare the hardware now and start with the setup process. So first of all, the SD card, it goes into the slot here, so the printed part to the top. And then we have to connect the power cable, which we will do at the end. And the next step is to connect our wireless keyboard and mouse. So I will connect my receiver for the wireless keyboard and mouse to one of the USB ports. I don't think it matters to which of them you connect it. And in case if you want to use a wired connection, you can always plug in the Ethernet cable here. But in our case, we have the Wi-Fi chip on board, so we will use this Wi-Fi chip on board. So the next thing is to also connect the HDMI cable, and the HDMI cable will on a fresh hardware, the HDMI connector is quite tight, so you have to put a little bit of force to plug in your HDMI cable. And the last step is to power the device. Before I plug in, I will switch my monitor to... Now I have my camera pointing to the screen where I've connected my Raspberry Pi. So as you can see, the board powers on, and you see the light starting to blink, and I've changed the source. And as you can see, the first thing that you see is something with root system being initialized, and the Raspberry Pi turns on, and it turns off and turns on again. We are greeted by the welcome screen. It says, "Welcome to the Raspberry Pi desktop, powered by Raspbian." Next, to get started. So here is where you choose. This is very similar to how you would set up an operating system on your PC. So in this case, Raspberry Pi is our PC. So I would leave them to the default, and now you can enter your password, which I will skip for now. And as you can see, the Wi-Fi configuration also happens here. So let's see, it should connect to my Wi-Fi, and it asks you for updating the software, which you can skip, or I will skip for now, and basically you're done. Let's quickly check if the internet works, so we will open up the browser here. let me look up my channel. There you go, the channel and the YouTube streaming. It works. So that's perfect. So you can also use your Raspberry Pi to do your video streaming, but as you can see, the CPU usage is quite high, or at least goes quite high whenever there is loading. And you can also choose what happens if we choose to do a high quality 1080p video. CPU jumps up, but it still works. So you can also do a full screen mode where you see there's a little bit of lag, but it works. So there you go. We successfully set up our Raspberry Pi to use it as a desktop PC. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. If you like my video, give it a thumbs up, click on the bell icon and stay subscribed.